is this in your way? You're all right? Okay. I'm not going to be here for very much longer. I'm going to be out of the way. So this is such a special occasion for us. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the introduction of our guest of honor tonight. We're all here to share in this wonderful occasion. Dr. Brooke Ellison has joined us tonight to receive the Kessler Foundation Neurorehabilitation Award. And the ASNR and the Kessler Foundation got together to create this award because we wanted to honor individuals who had made outstanding contributions to social and public awareness in neurorehabilitation. And, you know, I can't imagine that a more qualified person could have come to the attention of the nominating committee. So there's a number of things that I want to and have to tell you about because her accomplishments are so impressive. But then Dr. Bruce Rubin, who nominated her, also I think will say the thing that is kind of the heart of why we wanted her to come here tonight. Dr. Ellison, graduated from Harvard University. She graduated there in a bachelor's, magna cum laude. She has a master's degree in public policy, also from the Kennedy School of Government there at Harvard, a PhD from Stony Brook, and she's now an assistant professor there and holds a number of different positions. She wears an incredible number of hats. She's the director of education and ethics at their stem cell facility. She's in the Center for Community Support and Leadership Development, where she, the associate director, where she helps with services to the underserved, and the co-founder of Venture Think Tank, which is a group that addresses policy and device and technology needs for people who are ventilator users, a really underserved and underemphasized group of needs. And she also has a role in the graduate program, as I was learning today. So this is amazing. I have to learn more about time management, obviously, because I myself have difficulty with just one or two roles. But beyond these academic achievements, Dr. Ellison's first movie was in 2004. Notice the emphasis on first movie. The Brooke Ellison story, created or directed by Christopher Reeve, based on the book that she and her mom wrote. And it's wonderful. I really recommend it. Our CEO, when she was nominated, insisted on screening a number of clips with me and watching them with me. And her second movie in 2009, a documentary on stem cell research with James Siegel, Hope Deferred. And she ran for the New York State Senate in 2006. And this week she was at a meeting at the White House planning or working with the White House on the 25th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act. So just really an incredibly accomplished person and a ventilator user, wheelchair user, she'll talk about in her story. Dr. Bruce Rubin, though, is going to tell you really why we asked her to be here tonight.
Thank you, Anna. By the way, we applauded for pretty much everybody in this room. So I want to applaud Anna for all the work that she's done. And for all the rest of us who weren't announced separately, who are sitting here. Okay. But there is a commonality among most of us here. I think the majority of us had our lives touched in some way, shape, or form by individuals with neurological disabilities. And being a clinician who's taken care of a number of brain injury patients, spinal cord injury patients, stroke patients, etc., it goes without saying, you wish these patients well. You always want the best in their health. You want the best in their recovery and their introduction back into their lives. But it's hard. It's hard for any one of us to kind of sit there and really think about what it is to be in their wheelchair, their shoes, their AFO, whatever it may be. We have an intellectual thought about it, and we know that it's going to be hard, and we want them to do well, but we don't really think about all the things they have to think about and the things they have to do. Well, sure, you'd say, well, now I guess I would have to reshape my life plans because maybe I can't do what I was planning on doing. or I'm not going to be doing what I thought I would be doing. And then you have to say, well, okay, I'm going to be doing certain things, but you don't really think about how hard it may be to encounter problems that you didn't consider or that you encounter regularly trying to do the same things. And one step further, how do you keep that motivation to continue going when things are so difficult time after time after time? And again, clinicians, we see patients that come to go, so we don't really think about those things. And when I was thinking about that, a word came to mind, and that is hope. And so years ago, I'd look up Webster's, but now we have computers, so I looked up Wikipedia. And I'll read you what Wikipedia said about hope. It says, hope is an optimistic attitude of mind based on an expectation of positive outcomes related to events and circumstances into one's life or the world at large. As a verb, its definition include expect with confidence and to cherish a desire with anticipation. And I kept on thinking about this, and it's kind of a broad definition. And there was a psychologist who talked a little about hope, a guy named C.R. Snyder. And what Dr. Snyder had differentiated was the difference between optimism and hope. He said the difference between hope and optimism was that the former include practical pathways to an improved future. And that gets back to what I initially was saying, is that it's one thing to just say, well, I do well, I want my patients to do well and think they're just going to go and have a good life. But it's another thing to live it and accomplish it. And that's more than just optimism, that is hope. And tonight's awardee is the embodiment of hope. And with that, Dr. Ellison, I give you the microphone.
My goodness, that was such an incredibly humbling and just wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. I'm almost speechless, and that doesn't really happen to me very often. Despite being on a ventilator, it doesn't happen very often. So thank you so very much. Thank you, Dr. Rubin. Thank you, Dr. Barrett. Thank you, everyone here at ASNR for this just tremendous honor, and everyone at the Kessler Foundation, and for recognizing me here tonight. I'd also like to thank Leslie Overdahl for all of your help and all of your kind of dedication to get me here tonight. It's quite an event. And thank you, all of you, for your attendance tonight and for sharing this event with me. Please, by all means, eat your dinner. As you heard, I'm a professor, so my students do it all the time. So they have, an insatiable appetite and bottomless stomach. So it's nothing I'm not used to. So please go ahead, by all means, enjoy your dinner. But thank you. This is just just kind of off script a little bit. Dr. Rubin, your introduction was just incredible, and it actually touches on a lot of the things I'll be talking about tonight. And it's sometimes rare to interact with somebody who gets it so well, gets it so kind of exactly as you do. So thank you, and it's really very inspiring to see. So thank you for the work that you're doing and the introduction that you gave. Really, it's quite humbling. Thank you. So I'll begin by telling you just a little bit about myself, not that you haven't heard, but in the years that I've been on this earth, I have in effect lived two lives. I was born on Long Island, and for the first 11 years of my existence, I lived a very physically active life. I played Little League baseball and soccer. I was a dancer for 9 years, studying tap, jazz, and ballet. I played the cello and sang in the church choir. I studied karate and I attained a green belt. And all these things that I loved and all these things that I did, in my mind, shaped me as a person and really established my identity. But my first life ended on September 4th of 1990 and I was hit by a car while walking home from my first day of 7th grade. And since then, I've been paralyzed from my neck down and dependent on a ventilator to breathe. And all the things that I thought defined me as a person were gone. And I also believe that much of my life was gone also. But it really didn't take me very long to realize the calculation error that I was making. My body wouldn't respond, and I couldn't do some of the things that I'd always done. But my mind and my heart knew that I was exactly the same person that I had always been. And when I gained that understanding for myself, that was the understanding that I wanted everyone else to have about me as well. I didn't want to be defined by my limitations. I didn't want people to understand me based on my disability or on some perceived set of physical conditions, but on the life that I was choosing to lead, what I had in my heart and my mind, and what I was still very much able to do. Since there was nothing I could do about the circumstances that were beyond my control, this was how I wanted to live. So it was just over 24 years ago that I was lying in pediatric intensive care of Stony Brook University Hospital, really clinging to life and desperate for answers. Neither my family, nor I, nor any of the physicians treating me at the time had any idea whether I'd make it from one day to the next, let alone how my life would evolve. So I'd like to take just a minute to give you a bit of context about the circumstances that I was facing at the time. So for anyone, especially an 11-year-old, the hospital is an immensely terrifying place, filled with foreign sounds, unfamiliar people, and a reality based on a sense of loss. For me, IV poles holding bags of blood and fluids took the place of my bedposts. Get well cards hung on the walls where posters should have been. I couldn't talk. I couldn't eat. I couldn't see the world around me. And everything was different. And when a person or a family is forced to make a hospital a home for any length of time, the notion of normality is completely shifted, and you enter an existence characterized by uncertainty and fear, really seeking anything that feels normal or provides peace. That was the case for my family and me, and as a result, we looked to my doctors and specialists to help elucidate that which seemed completely foreign, and to give meaning to that which really seemed meaningless. The prognosis that was put on my condition can at best be described as, on average, pessimistic, if not downright grim. I say on average because there were powerful extremes on either side of that mean. People who served to diminish the hope that I, at an impressionable age of 11, had for my life, and people who worked to perpetuate it. But there was no degree, medical, scientific, or otherwise, that could have predicted the way my life would evolve. Since my accident, my life has been a dual relationship between creating a path to goals I set for myself, and at the same time learning to handle the obstacles put on that path. So my first goal was to get out of the hospital, where I'd been for 9 months, and to return to school. So I did that, returning to junior high school in the 8th grade, exactly 1 year after the day of my accident. And since that first important goal, I've tried to never let my physical condition limit me more than it had to. So as you heard, I got both my undergraduate and graduate degrees from Harvard. I've worked across the country as a motivational speaker. I wrote an autobiography about my life and the lives of the members of my family. And after getting my PhD in 2012, I'm now a professor at Stony Brook University, the very same institution that saved my life years ago. And I teach courses on health policy, leadership, ethics, and stem cell research. Now, there's no question that my life has been filled with instances of challenge, but I believe that out of challenge can come truly remarkable things. Through the years since my accident, I've had considerable experience with doctors and medical professionals, all of whom have left an impression on me in one way or another. There have been some who felt that my life would never really amount to anything, and that I was destined to live a life of complete limitation, if I were to live at all. There were some who could only view my life in terms of disability, referring to me not as a person, but instead as a quadriplegic, or worse yet, a quad. There were some who wanted to view my life and my condition only in terms of what they had seen in textbooks, even at a time when shockingly little was known about spinal cord injuries. So at a time when I needed things in my life that seemed normal, these instances were not only demeaning, not only dehumanizing, but stood as repeated reinforcements of limitation. But I can contrast this with doctors, healthcare professionals, and therapists who helped to make what could have seemed like insurmountable difficulty into manageable circumstances. What made these people different from others is that they were able to view my recovery as a process that they were taking an active role in, yet not so much so that I lost the ability to make choices for myself. My recovery became an effort for which I felt responsible and in which I was a partner. And I think that could be said for my family and my doctors as well. I was treated not as a bystander in otherwise uncontrollable circumstances, but instead as someone who was given the chance to make a positive impact on her own life. But it required talking and listening, becoming a healthcare partner rather than just a healthcare provider. And it always involved seeing me as much more than just the summation of physical conditions, but also as someone who can contribute meaningfully to her own future. And without these beliefs instilled in me, I know my life would have been vastly different. So I lived in the hospital for a total of 9 months. 6 weeks in pediatric intensive care and 7.5 months in rehabilitation. Even 24 years later, I remember the look, the feel, and the smell of my hospital rooms with such staggering clarity, as if they'll forever be a part of who I am. And I suspect that they probably will. In those 9 months, however, I underwent so many physical and psychological transformations, some of which I still struggle to understand, because when someone lives for that long in a medicalized circumstance, the notion of patient becomes as central to your identity as is your fingerprint. It's reality transforming. It's the acceptance of a cognitive dissonance so foreign that to accept it also means to incorporate it into every part of one's existence. But what's interesting is that disability is a concept that needs to be incorporated into one's own personal identity, but also needs to be more fully incorporated into larger societal identities. As difficult as it was for me to learn to reinterpret my life after my accident, I've come to see that our communities, our policies, our professions, and our sensibilities have had just as difficult a time. Since the time of my accident in 1990, we've all seen how society has transformed, how societal advancement and upward mobility have been offered to some, and how technology has been made available to many. But I say some And I say many because they certainly haven't been benefited all. The challenges that have taken place, though often met with much deserved adulation, can further marginalize many who already live at the margins. So as a result of any number of biases or manifestations of institutionalized prejudices, people with disabilities are socialized into seeming like they're less than, or that they have something to be ashamed of. People with disabilities are often made to believe that they aren't worth the investment or the effort, and that society would function much better without them. This, in fact, was a fallacy that I myself spent far too many years of my life grappling with, feeling like I had to apologize for or deny a very real and important aspect of who I am. But the transition from where I was 24 years ago to where I am today was a product of learning to reject all of the social indoctrination with the knowledge that my contribution to the world is just as important as anyone else's. While disability is so often portrayed as an allegory for vulnerability or incapability, the people who I know who confront disability are among the bravest, most determined, and most willing to imagine a life that's better. Over the years, I've come to understand that I can't be the person who I am, and the world can't be the place it needs to be without working to change what it is right now. So in various capacities over the past few years, both vocationally and personally, I've focused my attention on the nature of the lives that people with disabilities lead, the challenges they confront, the opportunities that they're afforded, the discrimination they encounter, and the creativity they adopt. A life lived with disability is, at once, a manifestation of existence at its most difficult, and the forced opportunity to tap into the deepest reserves of fortitude. But as is the case with any life, the lives of those who confront disability can only reach their potential, can only map an internal vision of identity and possibility onto an external set of opportunities when society is willing to offer the tools to do it. And that's where I know all of you are so critically important, and this is where your work has immeasurable meaning. So as you've heard, I'm a professor at Stony Brook University with specialties in bioethics, leadership, and stem cell research. And taken at face value, these disciplines might seem unrelated to one another, a jumble of only loosely held together ideas. But as far as I can see them, these disciplines intersect in such an elegant way that to separate them would be to lose some fundamental part of a complex picture. I've been a part of the stem cell research field for some 15 years, the field in which I became involved, not simply because of its relevance to my own life, but more importantly because of the future it might help to create for millions who confront disease or disability. And when I first became involved in this work, I understood that there would be some resistance, an uphill battle, the path of which would be impeded by controversy and misunderstanding. And we all read about advances in biomedicine, and especially stem cell research, all the time. In fact, just over these past few months or so, the field of stem cell research has contributed a tremendous amount to providing treatments and even cures to such once thought incurable conditions as age-related blindness and juvenile diabetes. And these breakthroughs stand to completely change not only how we understand disease, but also how we socially construct disability. Yet as potentially revolutionary as these scientific strides are for science and for medicine, they're far from understood by many people. In fact, many people who are in positions of great authority and decision-making. And before entering this field, I don't think I could have fully expected the extent of these impediments, how deeply held opposition can be, or what commitment it would take to try to overcome them. But it's interesting, in the years that I've been involved in the stem cell research cause, I've begun to see it as a reflection of the many ways in which scientific issues are contextualized. Scientific issues like climate change, nuclear technology, and reproductive health. How we as a society approach these issues is often the product of the confluence of social forces that reflect where we are as a people. And right now, we live in a time when there are many uncertainties about where science is headed, fears about what value ought to be put on life and at what point, and disagreements about where to direct scarce resources that are required for important medical research. But to take these questions on, whether individually or collectively, is a prototypical leadership challenge. A chance to encourage people to understand things differently, to reevaluate their beliefs and priorities, and to empower and mobilize people in ways that really haven't been done before. In essence, the battle for stem cell research advancement is a mirror of the battle that people with disabilities face every day. A battle to get people to see things, indeed to see them differently. When I was a graduate student at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, I was fortunate enough to take a course that really forever changed who I am and what I feel empowered as an individual to do. The course was on leadership and how to mobilize change, with attention given to raising broad social challenges in such a way that people are forced to question their own beliefs and motives. And many of the issues that we discussed centered on such emotionally charged things as racism, gender parity, and homophobia. Issues that resonate with the deepest core of who we are as a people and as a society. And to be a member of this course was to expose oneself to extensive self-analysis and to be unafraid of what you might hear from others, as well as what you might find in yourself. It was in this course that I first developed a sense of individual capacity to address stem cell research, not as a scientific issue, but as a social issue. It was in this course that I was first able to understand that in order to mobilize change on any issue, it requires a belief in oneself. The knowledge that none of us can pass along the impetus for change to someone else, lest change never takes place, or lest we undervalue our own position to effectuate it. What I came to realize through our participation in this class was that stem cell research is in reality an issue that's inextricably tied to how society evaluates disability and prioritizes science as a means to alleviate suffering. It's one of the many ways in which society can collectively address the challenges faced by people with disabilities. But stem cell research joins so many other tangible and practical means to bring attention to and solutions to the lives of disabled people. And it might seem to be the most difficult and most contentious. But even far easier and less socially contested methods to address disability have really fallen far short. Even this coming year, on the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the work that's been done, while necessary and good, is not nearly enough. Meeting the needs and challenges of people with disabilities will require as multifaceted a strategy as it will a comprehensive strategy. We need to think bigger, more inclusively, and more imaginatively, with ideas that bring people into the common quest for a future that's accessible to everyone. And we can approach this through policy, through technology, through inclusivity, and simply by offering assistance when assistance is needed. Disability needs to be incorporated into every policy measure and every social discussion that takes place. It needs to be as reflectively brought into the public consciousness as is the very notion of any basic civil rights, as the rights afforded to those most in need are a representation of how we care for everyone. We all need to work harder to upend the antiquated but persistent idea that disability is an aspect of identity that people need to be ashamed of, and turn it into something from which everyone, every institution can derive benefit. Because the fact of the matter is that our world is a better place when everyone is afforded the opportunity to be a part of it, and that people themselves are better as a result. And this knowledge serves as the foundation for doing the real and important work, fundamentally changing the way people with disabilities are valued in society. Because despite all of the perceptions and messages to the contrary, institutions and organizations are not made weaker by their incorporation with people with disabilities. And inclusion is not an act of charity. To the contrary, we as a society are stronger, more secure, and more ready to embrace a changing world when people with disabilities are included. And this is where I think much of my work, whether it's stem cell research, technology, leadership, or advocacy, converges so nicely with all of yours. Through your work and through the lives that you touch, you can help to convey the message that people, irrespective of circumstances, have something very meaningful to contribute. And instilling this belief helps to shoulder tremendous burden and encourages people to newly interpret the notion of ability. In essence, instilling this belief is a manifestation of hope. So hope is a concept that's really used very loosely in the fields of disability and rehabilitation. So much so, in fact, that its significance and relevance to our lives has really become eroded. When one undergoes a life-altering injury or accident that tests all of your strength, sometimes hope is all you have, and really all that you need. But rather than looking at hope as some kind of ethereal idea, I've come to see it as something much more tangible and action-oriented. In his book, The Future of American Progressivism, Harvard professor Roberto Unger makes a very valuable and I think very insightful claim that hope is the consequence of action, not the cause. And based on the experiences that I've undergone over the past 24 years, times in which my very sense of personal agency and motivation were tested, I can see the truth of this idea. And I've seen the very creation of hope through refusing to succumb to challenges and instead finding ways around them. So the concept of hope has been such an important part of my life that when I was an undergraduate student at Harvard, I decided to do my senior honors thesis on it and how it correlates with resilience. My academic concentration was cognitive neuroscience, so I took a real multidisciplinary approach to the issue, looking at hope from biological, psychological, and psychosocial perspectives. And what's interesting is that many of my fellow cognitive neuroscience majors were headed to medical school, and when learning of my thesis topic would look at me with a good amount of uncertainty, as if hope and resilience really had no place in the fields of neuroscience or medicine. But I'd really seen all too clearly how these two structures were perhaps among the most important aspects of my recovery 10 years before. So from the vantage point of both a patient and a person, What do I know about hope? Well, hope by its very nature, I believe, is a product of challenge. Or better said, it's a product of believing that challenge can be overcome. And there's a delicate balance, characteristic about hope. It's both something that needs to be developed on one's own, but can only be sustained with the help of those around us. It's something that grows out of challenge, but it's also something that's threatened by challenge. Hope sometimes can be seen as nearly synonymous with optimism, but these two concepts can really be understood as entirely different, if not opposite, with optimism being kind of a predisposition or attitude, and hope being an action-oriented, tested aspect of character. And at the same time, hope for all of us really, but especially for the people all of you will be coming in contact with, is critical to our lives. But what does that mean? What does it mean to have hope or to be hopeful, whether in life in general or particularly in the face of a life-changing experience? Well, that question can partially be answered by understanding what it means to not have hope. So in the face of any kind of life-altering disease, condition, or disorder, its magnitude can immediately become overwhelming, if not all-consuming. For me, the parts of my life that seem understandable, predictable, reliable, and secure became elusive and foreign. Every aspect of my life, no matter how personal, was no longer simply my own. Everything from eating to bathing to interacting with friends. There's a sense that one's life is no longer within one's control, or that the life that you are living is neither the one that you wanted, nor ever expected. There are feelings of victimization, and it becomes difficult to imagine how the rest of the world is going on around you without any problem. But I would venture to say that it isn't the challenge itself that leads to these feelings. For instance, it isn't cancer or heart disease or disability of any kind itself that changes the way we view our lives. It's the feeling of hopelessness born out of these conditions that really do. And with that in mind, a difficult diagnosis needs to be looked at as inherently separate from the feelings that we ultimately have about it. But we need to care for both. And while you can treat disease with a medical protocol, you can counteract hopelessness by helping to instill hope. But this can't be done on one's own. And there's a very delicate balance between self-agency and finding people to trust. You, as researchers, therapists, and doctors, will play a pivotal role in helping to strike that very balance. You need to speak, but you also need to listen. You need to answer questions, but you also need to ask them. The road to recovery, or to hope, cannot be walked alone, and you must be both a guide and a partner.